"Human, let us touch that thing between your legs." The words hung in the air of the opulent conference room, causing Ambassador Johnny Parker to choke on his coffee. He stared at the group of Prylorian delegates, their ethereal beauty a stark contrast to the shocking request. The Earth Prylorian Diplomatic Conference had been proceeding smoothly until this moment. Johnny, a seasoned diplomat, found himself utterly unprepared for the alien women's frank curiosity about human anatomy. Their lack of external genitalia made human reproductive organs a subject of intense fascination. Ambassador Ceres, the Prylorian leader, leaned forward, her iridescent eyes wide with scientific interest. "We have studied much of Earth biology, but this aspect remains a mystery. Would you allow us to examine you for the sake of cultural understanding?" Johnny's mind raced. The alliance with the Prylorians was crucial for Earth's future in the galactic community. Refusing could be seen as an insult, potentially jeopardizing years of careful negotiation. On the other hand, agreeing to such an intimate examination went far beyond his diplomatic training. With a deep breath, Johnny nodded his assent. "In the interest of fostering understanding between our species, I'll agree to your request." The Prylorian aides approached, their movements graceful yet clinical. As they began their examination, Johnny fought to maintain his composure. The room's tension was palpable, a mix of scientific curiosity and cultural taboo. Suddenly, a gasp echoed through the room. The aides stepped back, their expressions a mix of wonder and horror. Johnny realized, to his mortification, that the stress and physical contact had caused an involuntary physiological response. Ambassador Ceres's face drained of color. It's changing, growing." Her voice trembled with fear. "Is this some kind of biological weapon?" Before Johnny could explain, Ceres's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the floor in a dead faint. The room erupted into chaos as the other Prylorians rushed to their leader's aid, casting fearful glances at Johnny. Within hours, the incident had escalated into a full-blown diplomatic crisis. The Prylorian delegation threatened to cut all ties with Earth, viewing humans as potentially dangerous and unpredictable. Earth's government, desperate to salvage the alliance, tasked Johnny with an unprecedented mission: educate the Prylorians about human reproduction. As Johnny prepared for this delicate task, he became aware of a growing threat. An extremist human faction, vehemently opposed to alien relations, saw the Prylorians' reaction as proof of alien inferiority. They began plotting to sabotage the diplomatic mission, hoping to provoke a war that would assert human dominance. Caught between interstellar misunderstanding and human extremism, Johnny faced the most challenging assignment of his career. He had to navigate cultural sensitivities, combat prejudice, and somehow turn this embarrassing incident into an opportunity for mutual understanding. As he stood before a mirror, rehearsing his presentation on human biology, Johnny couldn't shake a nagging worry. In his preliminary discussions with Ceres, who had recovered from her fainting spell, he had learned that Prylorian reproduction methods were entirely different from humans. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the situation, raising concerns about potential biological incompatibilities and risks. With the fate of human-alien relations hanging in the balance, Johnny straightened his tie and steeled himself for the task ahead. He was about to give the most important and intimate presentation of his life to an audience of alien diplomats. The personal and professional risks were enormous, but the stakes for humanity's future in the galaxy were even higher. As he stepped out to face the Prylorian delegation, Johnny knew that every word, every explanation, could mean the difference between interstellar peace and conflict. Johnny took a deep breath, steadying himself as he prepared to face the Prylorian delegation once more. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, each step towards the conference room feeling heavier than the last. In his hands, he clutched a collection of carefully selected educational materials, anatomical models, diagrams, and holographic projections. These would be his tools in the delicate task of explaining human reproduction to an alien species. As the door slid open, Johnny was met with a sea of iridescent eyes, all fixed upon him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The tension in the room was palpable, a stark reminder of the incident that had led to this unprecedented diplomatic situation. Esteemed delegates, Johnny began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil, I appreciate your willingness to reconvene and continue our discussions. Today, I hope to provide a clear and comprehensive explanation of human reproductive biology. He gestured to a woman standing beside him, her posture professional and assured. Allow me to introduce Dr. Emily Sullivan, a renowned human biologist who has joined us to lend her expertise to this presentation. Dr. Sullivan nodded respectfully to the assembled aliens. It's an honor to be here. I hope that together we can foster a greater understanding between our species. As Johnny began his presentation, he moved with deliberate slowness, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle the Prelorians. He started with the basics of human anatomy, using the models and diagrams to illustrate his points. The human body is a complex system, he explained, pointing to a holographic projection of the human form. Our reproductive organs are just one part of this system, but they play a crucial role in the continuation of our species. The Prelorians' reactions varied as Johnny delved deeper into the specifics. Some leaned forward, their eyes wide with fascination, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. In the front row, Ambassador Ceres sat rigidly, her expression a complex mix of intrigue and lingering fear. As Johnny broached the topic of sexual intercourse, Ceres visibly tensed, her alien features contorted in a way that Johnny found difficult to interpret. Was it revulsion, curiosity, or perhaps a bit of both? In humans, Johnny continued, his voice calm and clinical, reproduction typically involves the physical joining of two individuals. This process... His words were cut short by a sudden commotion at the back of the room. The doors burst open with a resounding crash, and a group of armed individuals stormed in. At their head was a tall, imposing man with a scarred face. General Marcus Blackwood, a known member of the extremist human faction opposed to alien relations. "This ends now," Blackwood bellowed, his voice filling the room. "We're here to protect humanity's interests. These talks are over." Chaos erupted as Prelorian security personnel clashed with Blackwood's group. Shouts and the sound of energy weapons filled the air. Johnny's diplomatic training kicked in, and he reacted instinctively. He grabbed Ceres' arm and pulled her behind an overturned table for cover. In the confined space, Ceres found herself pressed against Johnny. Her initial fear seemed to give way to a grudging appreciation for his protective actions. Johnny could feel her alien heartbeat, rapid and unlike any human rhythm he'd ever felt. As the conflict raged around them, Johnny noticed something extraordinary. The Prelorians, in their agitated state, were emitting a strange glowing substance from their skin. It seemed to hang in the air like a fine mist, and as it came into contact with Blackwood's men, they began to slow down, their movements becoming uncoordinated. "Ceres," Johnny whispered, "what is that substance your people are producing?" The Prelorian ambassador looked at him, her iridescent eyes wide. "It's a natural defense mechanism. We didn't know it would affect humans like this." The glowing mist seemed to be turning the tide of the battle. Blackwood's supporters became increasingly disoriented, making them easier for the security forces to subdue. Within minutes, the situation was under control, with Blackwood and his men in custody. As the immediate danger passed, Johnny helped Ceres to her feet. The room was a mess of overturned furniture and scattered educational materials, but the aura of fear that had permeated the gathering earlier had dissipated. In its place was a tentative sense of camaraderie born from shared danger. "Are you all right?" Johnny asked Ceres, his hand still on her arm. She nodded, her gaze meeting his. "Yes, thanks to you. I believe I may have misjudged humans, Ambassador Parker." Before Johnny could respond, Dr. Sullivan approached them, her face flushed with excitement. "Johnny, I need to speak with you immediately. It's about the substance the Prelorians emitted during the attack." As Ceres moved to check on her fellow delegates, Johnny turned his attention to Dr. Sullivan. The biologist's eyes were alight with scientific fervor. "That glowing mist," she said in a low, urgent voice, "it has properties unlike anything I've ever seen. Preliminary scans suggest it could have immense medical applications for humans. It might be capable of curing a wide range of diseases." Johnny felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by a wave of unease. That's incredible news, but what are the implications for the Prilorians? Is it safe for them to produce this substance? Dr. Sullivan's expression grew somber. That's the problem. My initial analysis suggests that harvesting this substance might be harmful to the Prilorians. In some cases, it could even be fatal. The weight of this information settled on Johnny like a physical burden. He glanced over at Ceres, who was deep in conversation with her fellow delegates. The potential for a medical breakthrough that could save countless human lives was tantalizing, but at what cost? As if sensing his gaze, Ceres looked up and met Johnny's eyes. She excused herself from her group and made her way over to him. "Ambassador Parker," she said, her voice carrying a new note of respect, "I believe we should continue our discussion in a more private setting. Recent events have made me realize the importance of truly understanding your species." Johnny nodded, his mind racing with the implications of Dr. Sullivan's discovery and the shifting dynamics of human-Prilorian relations. "Of course, Ambassador Ceres. I think that would be wise." As they prepared to leave the conference room, Johnny found himself at a crossroads. The success of human-Prilorian relations now rested heavily on his shoulders, complicated by the potential medical breakthrough and the lingering threat of extremist factions. Moreover, he couldn't ignore the growing connection between himself and Ceres, a development that added yet another layer of complexity to an already delicate situation. With a final glance at the chaotic scene behind him, Johnny followed Ceres out of the room. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with diplomatic, ethical, and personal challenges. But as he walked beside the Prilorian ambassador, Johnny knew that the next few hours would be crucial in shaping the future of interspecies relations. As Johnny followed Ceres out of the chaotic conference room, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with diplomatic, ethical, and personal challenges. Little did he know that the next few hours would test him in ways he never imagined. They made their way to a private meeting room within the diplomatic complex, a space designed for sensitive discussions. The room was a marvel of technology, with holographic projectors lining the walls and a central display table capable of rendering complex 3D images. "Ambassador Ceres," Johnny began as they settled into their seats, "I believe we need to continue our discussion about human reproduction. It's crucial that we clear up any misunderstandings to prevent further incidents." Ceres nodded, her iridescent eyes fixed on Johnny. "I agree, Ambassador Parker. Recent events have made me realize the importance of truly understanding your species." As Johnny prepared to resume his explanation, the door slid open and Dr. Emily Sullivan entered, her arms full of data pads and holographic projectors. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, setting down her equipment. "I have some important findings to share about the substance the Prilorians emitted during the attack." Johnny gestured for her to join them. "Please, Dr. Sullivan, your expertise is most welcome." With a deep breath, Johnny activated the room's holographic display. A detailed, yet tasteful, anatomical representation of the human body appeared in the air between them. Ceres leaned forward, her discomfort evident but overshadowed by growing curiosity. "As I mentioned earlier," Johnny began, his voice steady and professional, "human reproduction typically involves the physical joining of two individuals." He manipulated the hologram, highlighting specific areas of the human anatomy. Ceres' eyes widened. "This joining, is it painful?" she asked, her voice a mix of fascination and apprehension. Johnny shook his head. "Generally, no. In fact, it's often associated with pleasure." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Can you tell me about Prilorian reproduction? It might help me explain our differences more effectively." As Ceres began to describe the intricacies of Prilorian biology, Dr. Sullivan interrupted gently. "I'm sorry, but I need to share my findings. It's about the substance your people emitted during the attack, Ambassador Ceres." Both Johnny and Ceres turned their attention to the biologist. Dr. Sullivan's eyes gleamed with excitement as she pulled up her data on the holographic display. "The substance, which I've tentatively named Prilorium, has remarkable properties," she explained. "Our preliminary analysis suggests it could have immense medical applications for humans. It might be capable of curing a wide range of diseases." Johnny felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by unease. "That's incredible news, but What are the implications for the Prilorians? Is it safe for them to produce this substance? Dr. Sullivan's expression grew somber. That's the problem. My analysis suggests that harvesting this substance might be harmful to the Prilorians. In some cases, it could even be fatal. The weight of this information settled over the room. Ceres looked from Johnny to Dr. Sullivan, her alien features contorting in a way that suggested deep thought. I would be willing to undergo tests, Ceres said after a long moment. If this substance could help your people, we should understand it better. Before Johnny could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. The room's displays flickered, and the lights dimmed momentarily before switching to emergency power. "What's happening?" Ceres asked, her voice tinged with fear. Johnny moved to the door, but it remained sealed. The security systems must have activated. We're locked in. As if in response to his words, the room's temperature began to rise rapidly. The environmental controls, affected by the power fluctuations, were malfunctioning. "This isn't good," Dr. Sullivan said, wiping sweat from her brow. The rising heat could trigger unexpected responses in Prilorian physiology. As if on cue, Ceres' skin began to glow more intensely. The air around her shimmered with a fine mist of Prilorium. Johnny and Dr. Sullivan watched in amazement as their minor injuries from the earlier scuffle began to heal at an accelerated rate. However, the increased Prilorium production was clearly taking a toll on Ceres. She slumped in her chair, her breathing labored. "It hurts," she gasped, her usually melodious voice strained. Johnny rushed to her side, driven by a mix of diplomatic duty and growing personal concern. "Dr. Sullivan, we need to stabilize her condition and lower the room's temperature. Any ideas?" As Dr. Sullivan searched for a solution, she noticed something peculiar. When Johnny placed his hand on Ceres' arm to comfort her, the Prilorian's glow seemed to dim slightly, and her breathing eased. "Johnny," Dr. Sullivan said, excitement creeping into her voice despite the dire situation, "I think physical contact might help regulate her Prilorium production. There could be a symbiotic aspect to Prilorian biology that responds positively to certain types of touch." Johnny looked at Ceres, then back at Dr. Sullivan. The implications of this discovery were enormous, both scientifically and diplomatically. But more immediately, it might be the key to saving Ceres' life. "Ambassador Ceres," Johnny said softly, "I believe physical contact might help stabilize your condition. Would you be comfortable with that?" Ceres nodded weakly, her iridescent eyes meeting Johnny's. As he gently embraced her, the effect was immediate. The intensity of her glow decreased, and her breathing became more regular. Dr. Sullivan watched intently, taking readings with her instruments. "This is fascinating," she murmured. "The Prilorium production is stabilizing, and Ceres' vital signs are improving. But Johnny, we might need to intensify the physical contact to fully counteract the effects of the heat." Johnny understood the unspoken implication. To save Ceres and potentially unlock the key to safely harvesting Prilorium, he might need to engage in more intimate physical contact with her. The diplomatic consequences could be far-reaching, further complicating the already tense human-Prilorian relations. As he held Ceres, feeling her alien heartbeat against his chest, Johnny was acutely aware of the multiple crises unfolding around them. Outside the room, chaos likely ensued as security forces battled unseen attackers. The fate of the diplomatic mission hung in the balance, with the potential medical breakthrough of Prilorium adding another layer of complexity to the conflict. Johnny knew his next actions could determine not only Ceres' survival, but also the future of human-Prilorian relations, and potentially the course of human medical science. With time running out and options limited, he steeled himself to make a decision that would have profound consequences for all involved. Looking into Ceres' eyes, Johnny saw fear, trust, and something else he couldn't quite identify. He took a deep breath, preparing to take the next step in this unprecedented interspecies encounter. Johnny locked eyes with Ceres, his heart racing as he contemplated the gravity of their situation. The room's temperature continued to climb, and Ceres' condition was deteriorating rapidly. With a deep breath, he made his decision. "Ceres," he said softly, "I believe I can help stabilize your condition, but it will require more intimate physical contact. Are you comfortable with that? Ceres nodded weakly, her iridescent eyes filled with trust and a hint of fear. Yes, she whispered, her voice strained. Please, help me. Johnny carefully approached her, his movements gentle and deliberate. He wrapped his arms around her slender form, pulling her close against his chest. The effect was immediate and profound. Ceres's glow dimmed to a soft, pulsating light, and her labored breathing eased. The shimmering mist of prilorium around her became less intense, settling into a gentle, controlled flow. Dr. Sullivan watched in fascination, her fingers flying over her data pad as she recorded every detail of the interaction. Remarkable, she murmured. The symbiotic effect is even stronger than I anticipated. As Johnny held Ceres, he began to feel an unexpected change within himself. A tingling sensation spread through his body, starting from where his skin made contact with hers and radiating outward. His senses sharpened, and his mind felt clearer than ever before. Dr. Sullivan, he called out, his voice tight with concentration. I'm experiencing some kind of enhancement. My cognitive functions are increasing rapidly. The biologist's eyes widened. It must be the prolonged exposure to prilorium. Your body is adapting to it, integrating its properties. Johnny's enhanced mind raced, processing information at an unprecedented speed. He glanced at the room's control panel, and suddenly, the complex circuitry seemed to make perfect sense. I think I can override the security lockdown, he said, carefully disentangling himself from Ceres. As he approached the panel, his fingers moved with uncanny precision, interfacing with the system in ways he never thought possible. Within moments, the door slid open, and cool air rushed in. Outside, the sounds of battle echoed through the corridors. Explosions and energy weapon discharges reverberated off the walls, punctuated by shouts and screams. We need to contact security, Johnny said, turning back to Dr. Sullivan and Ceres. Whatever's happening out there, it's big. Using his newly enhanced abilities, Johnny tapped into the complex's communication systems. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the stern face of Commander Sarah Hayes. Ambassador Parker, she said, surprise evident in her voice. We're in the middle of a crisis. Blackwood's extremists have breached our outer defenses. Johnny quickly explained their situation, including the discovery of prilorium's potential and his own enhanced state. Commander, I believe we can use prilorium to our advantage, he concluded. Hayes's eyes narrowed in thought. A non-lethal solution. It could work. We'll fall back, lure them deeper into the complex. Can you control the release of this prilorium? With Ceres's help, yes, Johnny replied, glancing at the Prilorian ambassador who had regained some of her strength. As they formulated their plan, Dr. Sullivan made another startling discovery. Johnny, Ceres, she called out, excitement in her voice. The scans show a growing telepathic connection between you two. It's subtle, but it's there. Johnny turned to Ceres, suddenly aware of a presence at the edge of his consciousness. It was alien yet familiar, a comforting warmth that he instinctively knew was Ceres. This could be the key, he said, reaching out to take Ceres's hand. As their fingers intertwined, the connection strengthened. Together, we can fine-tune the prilorium release. Working in tandem, Johnny and Ceres guided the dispersion of prilorium throughout the complex. Through their telepathic link, they balanced the substance's potency, ensuring it would subdue the extremists without causing harm. Commander Hayes' voice came through the comm system once more. It's working, she reported. The extremists are dropping like flies, non-lethal takedowns across the board. A surge of relief washed over Johnny, but it was short-lived. Hayes' next words sent a chill down his spine. Blackwood's still active. He's got some kind of protective gear. He's heading for the central control room. Johnny's enhanced mind quickly processed the implications. He's going to try to expose everything, both our weaknesses and the Prilorians. We can't let that happen. He turned to Ceres, their eyes meeting in a moment of silent communication. Through their link, he felt her trust, her hope, and something deeper that he couldn't quite name. I have to go, he said softly. I have to stop Blackwood. Ceres nodded, understanding flowing through their connection. Be careful, she said, her melodious voice filled with concern. "What we've discovered here, it's bigger than just our two species. It's a chance for true symbiosis, true understanding." Johnny squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "I know. I'll do whatever it takes to protect that chance." As he prepared to leave, Johnny took one last look at Ceres. The fear and misunderstanding that had initially defined their relationship had transformed into something profound. He saw in her eyes the possibility of a future where humans and Prilorians could coexist, learn from each other, and grow together. With renewed purpose, Johnny stepped out of the room and into the chaos of the embattled complex. His body hummed with enhanced energy, his mind sharp and focused. As he navigated the corridors, avoiding pockets of subdued extremists and security personnel, he formulated his plan. Blackwood was a threat, not just to the peace they'd worked so hard to achieve, but to the very future of interspecies cooperation. Johnny knew he had to stop him, had to find a way to neutralize the threat without causing further diplomatic incidents. As he approached the central control room, Johnny could hear Blackwood's voice echoing through the speakers, the start of his threatened broadcast. Time was running out. Johnny took a deep breath, feeling Ceres' presence in the back of his mind, a constant reminder of what was at stake. With steely tenacity, he prepared to confront Blackwood and safeguard the future of human-Prilorian relations. Johnny raced through the corridors, his Prilorium-enhanced senses on high alert. The complex was a maze of chaos and subdued extremists, but his newfound abilities allowed him to navigate with uncanny precision. As he approached the central control room, a group of armed men emerged from a side passage, their eyes wild with willpower. "Stop right there!" one of them shouted, raising his weapon. Johnny's enhanced reflexes kicked in, and he dodged the first blast of energy with inhuman speed. As he moved, he felt a strange sensation ripple through his body. His skin seemed to shift and harden, forming a protective layer against the incoming attacks. "What the—" another extremist exclaimed, his eyes widening in shock. Johnny took advantage of their surprise, closing the distance in a blur of motion. His fist connected with the first attacker's jaw, sending him sprawling. The others moved to surround him, but Johnny's body continued to adapt, his arms elongated slightly, giving him extra reach as he struck out at his opponents. As the fight progressed, Johnny became aware of a new ability emerging. He could feel his body reshaping itself in subtle ways, becoming more streamlined and agile. He ducked under a wild swing, his torso bending at an impossible angle before retaliating with a powerful uppercut that sent the attacker flying. In mere moments, the group of extremists lay unconscious at his feet. Johnny stood there, panting slightly, marveling at his transformed body. He flexed his fingers, watching as they slowly returned to their normal shape. "Commander Hayes," he spoke into his communicator, "I've encountered resistance near the central control room. The situation is under control, but be advised that some extremists have managed to resist the Prilorium's effects." "Understood, Ambassador," Hayes' voice crackled back. "We're using Dr. Sullivan's Prilorium-based weapons to subdue the remaining hostiles. Proceed with caution." Johnny nodded, even though Hayes couldn't see him, and continued towards his destination. As he neared the control room, he could hear Blackwood's voice echoing through the speakers, the sound of his speech sending a chill down Johnny's spine. "And with this information, the world will see the true danger these aliens pose to humanity," Blackwood was saying, his voice filled with fanatical conviction. Johnny approached the door, his enhanced senses picking up the subtle hum of active computer systems beyond. He took a deep breath, centering himself and feeling the comforting presence of Ceres at the edge of his consciousness. With a swift motion, he overrode the door's security and stepped into the control room. Blackwood spun around, his eyes widening in surprise and then narrowing with hatred. "Ambassador Parker," he spat, his hand hovering over a console. "One more step and I release everything. All the dirty little secrets about your precious aliens and our own vulnerabilities." Johnny raised his hands in a placating gesture, his mind racing. Through his connection with Ceres, he suddenly became aware of the complex systems surrounding him. The control room's technology seemed to whisper to him, offering pathways and possibilities he had never imagined. General Blackwood, Johnny said calmly, you don't have to do this. We can talk about your concerns, find a peaceful solution. As he spoke, Johnny's consciousness extended into the facility systems. He could feel the data transfer in progress, a stream of information flowing towards an off-site server. With careful mental manipulation, he began to corrupt the data, inserting subtle errors and inconsistencies that would render it useless. Blackwood's eyes darted between Johnny and the console, sweat beading on his forehead. Talk? It's too late for talk, Parker. You've already sold out humanity to these things. Johnny took a careful step forward, maintaining eye contact with Blackwood while his mind continued its invisible work. That's not true, General. The Prilorians aren't a threat. In fact, we've made incredible breakthroughs that could benefit both our species. Blackwood's hand trembled over the console. Lies! All lies! He shouted, his composure cracking. I'll show everyone the truth. Suddenly, Blackwood's eyes widened in realization. His fingers flew over the console, checking the data transfer. No, he whispered, then louder. No, what have you done? Johnny tensed, ready for action. It's over, General. The data is corrupted. Stand down and we can... But Blackwood wasn't listening. With a roar of frustration, he smacked his fist down on a hidden button. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and Johnny felt a surge of energy through the systems he was connected to. If I can't expose the truth, Blackwood snarled, then I'll bury it. This entire facility will be reduced to ashes. Johnny's enhanced mind quickly grasped the situation. The power core was overloading, building towards a catastrophic meltdown. He lunged at Blackwood, grappling with the older man while simultaneously reaching out with his technopathic abilities to counter the sabotage. The strain was immense. Johnny's body began to shake, the prilorium in his system fluctuating wildly as he pushed himself to the limit. He could feel the power core's energy spiraling out of control, threatening to consume everything. In that moment of crisis, Johnny made a desperate decision. He released Blackwood, who stumbled back, and turned his full attention to the facility systems. Placing his hands on the main console, he allowed the prilorium to flow freely through his body. The sensation was overwhelming. Johnny felt his physical form begin to lose cohesion, merging with the technology around him. His consciousness expanded, encompassing the entire facility. He could see every system, every circuit, every atom of energy coursing through the complex. With this unprecedented level of control, Johnny began the monumental task of stabilizing the power core. He rerouted energy, closed off overloading sections, and carefully balanced the flow of power throughout the facility. Each action was a battle against the raging forces, threatening to tear the complex apart. But the strain was taking its toll. Johnny could feel his body breaking down, the massive influx of prilorium pushing his transformation beyond its limits. His vision blurred, the physical world melting away as he became one with the facility's systems. In the back of his mind, Johnny sensed a surge of concern and perseverance that wasn't his own. Ceres had felt his distress through their telepathic link. He could feel her moving, leaving the safety of the sealed room to come to his aid. As Johnny struggled to maintain control of both the facility and his own mutating form, he became acutely aware of the enormity of the situation. The fate of human Prilorian relations, the lives of everyone in the complex, and his own existence all hung in the balance. And somewhere in the chaos, Ceres was racing towards him, driven by a connection that transcended their diplomatic roles. With his consciousness spread throughout the facility, Johnny focused on stabilizing the core, even as he felt his own identity slipping away into the vast network of energy and information. The battle for control raged on, its outcome uncertain, as Ceres drew ever closer to the heart of the crisis. Johnny's consciousness, spread thin across the facility systems, began to flicker and fade. The strain of controlling the power core threatened to tear him apart at the molecular level. Suddenly, a familiar presence pierced through the chaos of his fragmented mind. Ceres had arrived at the control room, her willpower radiating through their telepathic link. She wasn't alone. "Ambassador Parker?" Dr. Sullivan's voice cut through the haze of Johnny's disintegrating senses. "Hold on!" Ceres approached Johnny's semi-corporeal form, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. She turned to Dr. Sullivan, who nodded grimly. "Do it," the doctor said, already pulling equipment from her bag. "I'll work on stabilizing his physical form." Without hesitation, Ceres reached out and placed her hand on Johnny's fluctuating body. The moment they touched, a surge of energy coursed through them both. Johnny felt Ceres's consciousness merge with his own, her natural affinity for Prilorium, creating a feedback loop that strengthened their connection. Through their shared perception, Johnny experienced a flood of alien sensations. He felt the complex interplay of Prilorium within Ceres's body, the way it flowed and pulsed with her every thought. At the same time, Ceres was overwhelmed by the intensity of human emotion, the raw power of Johnny's persistence as he fought to save the facility. Together, they wrestled with the facility's systems. Johnny's technopathic abilities, amplified by Ceres's control over Prilorium, allowed them to dive deep into the heart of the power core. They rerouted energy pathways, sealed off overloading sections, and carefully balanced the flow of power throughout the complex. As Johnny and Ceres worked in unison, Dr. Sullivan moved with practiced efficiency. She analyzed Johnny's rapidly mutating physiology, her mind racing through potential solutions. With steady hands, she began synthesizing a compound, combining elements of human and Prilorian biology. "This should help stabilize your cellular structure," Dr. Sullivan explained, preparing an injection. "It won't be pleasant, but it should keep you from breaking down completely." She administered the compound, and Johnny felt a burning sensation spread through what remained of his physical form. The pain was intense, but it anchored him, providing a focal point in the sea of data and energy he had become. While the trio fought to save the facility, General Blackwood saw his chance to escape. He lunged for the door but found himself suddenly trapped in a shimmering field of energy. The Prilorium-enhanced security systems, now under Johnny's direct control, had activated a containment protocol. Blackwood struggled against the field, his protective suit sparking and malfunctioning under the strain. Suddenly, the suit's integrity failed, exposing him to a concentrated dose of Prilorium. Instead of the calming effect it had on others, Blackwood's body reacted violently. He convulsed, his eyes rolling back in his head, before he collapsed unconscious to the floor. With Blackwood neutralized and the power core slowly stabilizing, Johnny began the arduous process of extracting himself from the facility systems. It felt like pulling himself out of quicksand, each movement a monumental effort. Ceres, still physically and mentally connected to Johnny, experienced every moment of his struggle. As Johnny's body gradually reformed, Ceres found herself overcome with new sensations. The fear and revulsion she had once felt towards human physicality melted away, replaced by an intense curiosity. Through their link, she experienced the complex interplay of human hormones and neural pathways, feeling Johnny's relief, exhaustion, and something else, a warmth that seemed to radiate from his core. Johnny, too, was changed by the experience. As his body settled back into its normal state, he found himself hyper-aware of Ceres's presence. His Prilorium-altered physiology began emitting pheromones, triggering a cascade of reactions in Ceres's alien biology. The door to the control room burst open, and Commander Sarah Hayes entered with a squad of security personnel. They quickly secured the area, apprehending the unconscious Blackwood and beginning to assess the damage. "Status report," Hayes barked, her eyes scanning the room before settling on Johnny and Ceres, still locked in their intimate connection. Dr. Sullivan stepped forward, her face a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "The immediate crisis has been averted, Commander, but I think we may have stumbled onto something even more significant." She gestured towards Johnny and Ceres, who were slowly disentangling themselves, both looking dazed. "The level of synchronization they achieved," Dr. Sullivan continued, "it's unprecedented. This could be the key to true human-Prilorian cooperation." As the adrenaline of the crisis faded, Johnny and Ceres found themselves grappling with the aftermath of their shared experience. The barriers of fear and misunderstanding that had once separated their species had been shattered, replaced by a deep mutual understanding. And something more, an attraction that defied their biological differences. Johnny cleared his throat, trying to focus on the matter at hand. "We need to convene an emergency meeting with the remaining delegates," he said, his voice hoarse. "There's a lot we need to discuss." Commander Hayes nodded sharply. "Agreed. I'll gather everyone in the main conference room in 1 hour. That should give us some time to secure the facility and assess the damage." As the others began to file out of the control room, Johnny and Ceres lingered, their eyes locked in silent communication. The intensity of their connection had faded, but a thread still remained, humming with potential. "Are you okay?" Johnny asked softly, reaching out to steady Ceres as she swayed slightly. Ceres nodded, her large eyes filled with a mix of wonder and confusion. I felt everything you felt," she said, her melodious voice tinged with awe. "It was overwhelming, but also beautiful." Johnny felt a rush of warmth at her words, accompanied by a surge of pheromones that made Ceres inhale sharply. They both recognized the diplomatic minefield they were entering, but in that moment neither could deny the pull they felt towards each other. "We should join the others," Johnny said reluctantly, gesturing towards the door. Ceres nodded, but as they walked, she allowed her hand to brush against Johnny's, sending a shiver of electricity through them both. As they made their way to the conference room, both knew that the challenges ahead went far beyond politics and science. They had uncovered a new frontier in human-Prelorian relations, one that would test the boundaries of both their species and their own hearts. The emergency meeting convened in the main conference room was unlike any diplomatic gathering in human or Prelorian history. The tension in the air was palpable as delegates from both species filed in, their eyes darting between Johnny and Ceres, who stood at the head of the table. Commander Hayes cleared her throat, bringing the room to attention. "We've averted a crisis today, thanks to the actions of Ambassador Parker and Envoy Ceres. But we've also stumbled upon something that could change the course of our relations forever." Dr. Sullivan stepped forward, her eyes alight with excitement despite her evident exhaustion. The level of synchronization achieved between Ambassador Parker and Envoy Ceres during the crisis was unprecedented. It appears that the combination of human technopathic abilities and Prelorian biology has unlocked a new frontier in interspecies communication and cooperation. The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, some excited, others concerned. Johnny raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "What we experienced was intense," he began, glancing at Ceres, "but it also showed us the potential for true understanding between our species. We propose establishing a joint research team to explore this phenomenon further." Ceres nodded, her melodious voice carrying across the room. "This could be the key to overcoming the barriers that have kept our species apart. We must pursue this opportunity." As the meeting progressed, decisions were made rapidly. Dr. Sullivan was appointed to lead the joint human Prelorian research team, with a focus on studying the medical applications of Prelorium. Johnny, still recovering from his ordeal, was designated as the primary liaison between humans and Prelorians. In the weeks that followed, the diplomatic complex transformed into a hub of unprecedented cooperation. Dr. Sullivan and her team worked tirelessly, making breakthrough after breakthrough. Their first major success came in the form of a stabilized Prelorium compound that could be safely harvested without harming Prelorians. Johnny found himself at the center of this new era of collaboration. His enhanced physiology, while no longer as potent as during the crisis, allowed him to bridge the gap between the two species more effectively than anyone else. He worked closely with Ceres, developing new protocols for interspecies interaction. Their shared experience had fundamentally altered their relationship. As they spent long hours together, poring over data and drafting proposals, Johnny became increasingly aware of a shift in Ceres' demeanor. Her initial wariness of human physicality had given way to curiosity. One evening, as they worked late in Johnny's office, Ceres broached the subject. "Johnny," she began, her large eyes fixed on him intently, "I've been thinking about our experience during the crisis. The sensations we shared, they were unlike anything I'd ever known." Johnny nodded, feeling a familiar warmth spread through his body. "It was intense," he agreed, "and beautiful, in a way I can't quite describe." Ceres leaned closer, her alien features softened by the dim light. "I want to understand more about human intimacy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For diplomatic reasons, of course. But also, she trailed off, her hand brushing against Johnny's. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through them both. Johnny swallowed hard, acutely aware of the diplomatic minefield they were entering. Ceres, we should be careful. There's still so much we don't understand about how our species interact. But even as he spoke, Johnny felt his body responding to her proximity. The prilorium in his system seemed to hum with energy, attuning itself to Ceres's alien biology. Their moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Commander Hayes entered, her face grave. "We have a situation," she announced. "General Blackwood has regained consciousness. He's demanding to speak with both of you." The news of Blackwood's recovery sent ripples through the diplomatic community. His trial before a military tribunal became a focal point for both species, highlighting the need for clearer laws governing human-alien relations. As Johnny and Ceres prepared to testify, they found themselves spending even more time together. Their shared experiences formed the basis of their testimony, but also deepened their personal connection. One evening, as they rehearsed their statements, Ceres surprised Johnny with a request. "I want to conduct a comprehensive study of human intimacy," she said, her voice steady despite the faint blush coloring her alien features. "With you as my primary subject." Johnny blinked, momentarily speechless. "Ceres, are you sure? This could have serious diplomatic implications." Ceres nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm sure. We've already crossed so many boundaries, Johnny. This is the logical next step in fostering understanding between our species." As they stood there, the air charged with possibility, neither of them could have predicted the far-reaching consequences of their decision. The study they were about to embark on would not only change their lives, but potentially reshape the future of human-prilorian relations. The next morning, as they prepared to present their proposal to the joint research team, Johnny and Ceres shared a moment of silent communication. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, pioneers on the frontier of a new era of interspecies cooperation and understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, pioneers on the frontier of a new era of interspecies cooperation and intimacy. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Johnny and Ceres worked tirelessly, refining their presentation and steeling themselves for the momentous joint session that would determine the future of human-prilorian relations. As the day approached, the atmosphere in the diplomatic complex grew electric with anticipation. On the morning of the assembly, Johnny stood before the mirror, adjusting his formal attire. His hands trembled slightly as he straightened his collar. A soft knock at the door preceded Ceres's entrance. She glided into the room, her iridescent skin shimmering with nervous energy. "Are you ready?" she asked, her melodious voice tinged with apprehension. Johnny turned to face her, drinking in the sight of his prilorian partner. Her alien beauty never ceased to amaze him. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, managing a small smile. They made their way to the grand assembly hall, the corridors unusually quiet. As they approached the massive doors, they could hear the low hum of voices from within. Johnny reached out and took Ceres's hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. She returned the gesture, her large eyes meeting his with a mix of drive and trust. The doors swung open, revealing a sea of faces, human and prilorian alike. The hall fell silent as Johnny and Ceres stepped onto the podium. Johnny's enhanced senses picked up on the tension in the room, the mix of hope and skepticism that permeated the air. Taking a deep breath, Johnny began their carefully prepared speech. As he spoke, he felt the familiar warmth of Ceres's mind connecting with his. Their telepathic bond, forged in crisis and strengthened through intimacy, allowed them to present their case with unparalleled synchronicity. "Esteemed delegates," Johnny's voice rang out, clear and steady, "we stand before you today, not just as representatives of our respective species, but as living proof of what can be achieved when we open our minds and hearts to understanding." Ceres continued seamlessly, her melodious tones complementing Johnny's deeper voice. "Our journey began with fear and mistrust, but through shared experiences and open communication, we discovered a connection that transcends our biological differences." As they spoke, sharing vivid memories of their experiences, A soft glow began to emanate from their bodies. The Prilorium aura surrounding them pulsed gently, growing brighter with each shared thought and emotion. The audience watched, transfixed, as Johnny and Ceres painted a picture of a future where humans and Prilorians could coexist in harmony, learning from each other and pushing the boundaries of science, culture, and intimacy. Just as their speech reached its crescendo, a commotion erupted at the back of the hall. A group of Prilorians burst through the doors, their faces contorted with anger and disgust. At their head was a familiar figure, Zara, Ceres' estranged sister. "Stop this madness!" Zara cried, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "This abomination cannot be allowed to continue." She surged forward, pushing past the shocked delegates. Johnny instinctively moved to shield Ceres, but she stepped forward, facing her sister with quiet dignity. "Zara, please," Ceres pleaded, her voice steady despite the hurt evident in her eyes. "Listen to what we have to say. Experience what we have experienced." But Zara was beyond reason. She lunged forward, attempting to physically separate Johnny and Ceres. In the ensuing scuffle, her hand brushed against the Prilorium aura surrounding the couple. The effect was instantaneous and profound. Zara froze, her eyes wide with shock, as a flood of emotions and memories washed over her. She staggered back, overwhelmed by the intensity of the connection she had inadvertently tapped into. Taking advantage of the momentary lull, Dr. Sullivan sprang into action. From her seat in the front row, she activated a device she had been developing in secret. A wave of energy pulsed through the hall, enveloping everyone present in a field of stabilized Prilorium. The effect was mesmerizing. Humans gasped as their emotional sensitivity heightened, while Prilorians found their natural empathic abilities amplified. For a few precious moments, every being in the hall experienced a taste of the deep connection shared by Johnny and Ceres. Barriers crumbled as understanding flowed freely. Humans felt the complex social structures and deep emotional bonds of Prilorian society. Prilorians, in turn, experienced the passionate intensity of human emotions and the profound impact of physical intimacy. As the field dissipated, the atmosphere in the hall had transformed completely. The anger and fear that had fueled Zara and her followers melted away, replaced by a sense of wonder and curiosity. Human delegates who had been skeptical now looked at their Prilorian counterparts with new appreciation. In the wake of this shared experience, the vote was unanimous. The interspecies program would not only continue, but would be expanded. Johnny and Ceres were appointed as official ambassadors, tasked with leading this new era of cooperation. Months flew by as the positive effects of the program became evident. Advances in medicine, propelled by the combination of human ingenuity and Prilorian biology, led to breakthroughs in treating previously incurable diseases. Technological innovations flourished as human and Prilorian scientists collaborated, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Cultural exchange programs sprang up across both worlds, fostering understanding and friendship between the species. The Prilorium-enhanced empathy field, refined and improved by Dr. Sullivan and her team, became a standard tool in diplomatic negotiations, not just between humans and Prilorians, but across the galaxy. At the heart of this renaissance were Johnny and Ceres. They established the first human Prilorian cultural center, a place where individuals from both species could explore interspecies relationships in a safe, controlled environment. The center quickly became famous for its comprehensive education programs, covering everything from biology and culture to the intricacies of interspecies intimacy. As the first anniversary of the joint session approached, Johnny and Ceres prepared for a public ceremony to renew their commitment to each other and to interspecies harmony. The event was to be broadcast across both human and Prilorian worlds, a symbol of how far they had come. On the morning of the ceremony, Johnny stood on the balcony of their shared quarters, looking out over the sprawling diplomatic complex. Ceres joined him, her presence a comforting warmth at his side. "Can you believe how much has changed in just 1 year?" Johnny mused, his voice filled with wonder. Ceres leaned into him, her skin shimmering with contentment. "It's more than I ever dared to hope for," she replied softly. As they stood there, bathed in the light of a new dawn, both felt a sense of anticipation for what the future might hold. The ceremony that day would mark not just their personal commitment, but a new chapter in the story of their two species. With each other by their side, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in the power of understanding, acceptance, and love to overcome even the most alien of differences.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.